I am Lily. The paint on the porch rails was always flaking, and the steps sighed when you put weight on them. We said the house had character, which was our way to make peace with the soft wood and the draft in winter. Still, the house felt like a hand on my shoulder when I came home from work. It knew my steps, and I knew how the front door stuck in the rain and opened clean in the sun. In that house, one gray morning, my sister asked for my savings, and my life took a turn I could not undo. Maya had that fast voice she used when she wanted something and wanted it now. She was older by 3 years and taller by 2 inches, and she always stood close enough that the ask felt like a test. She leaned on the kitchen island in her robe and said, "Give me your savings." No hello. No question. Not even please. She just set a chipped mug on the counter and looked at me like I was a bank with legs. I had $4,800 spread across 2 accounts, small to some, hard one to me. I knew the dollar amount by heart because I built it with late shifts at a coffee shop near the ferry, a second job doing brochure layouts for a local plumber, and a few Saturday babysits for the neighbor's twins. That money was my promise to myself, a cushion, a future, a way out if I needed one. I kept a torn piece of paper in my wallet where I wrote each deposit. It was not fancy. It was my map. I said, no, the word came out clean, like a plate set on a table. I expected a fight. I still remember the way Maya blinked, as if she could not hear a simple word from me. Don't be dramatic, she said. The mortgage is due. It's a couple thousand. I'll pay you back next month. Our dad, Robert, had co-signed when she bought the house from a relative 2 years ago, and the payments had been touch and go ever since. Some months were steady. Some months were smoke. I had paid before, once, twice, and the money had vanished into late fees and new shoes and emergencies that never ended. Mom, Elaine, stood at the stove with the kettle. She stirred her tea, though it did not need stirring. She had that soft look that meant, please don't make trouble. Dad was at work at the time, but his voice lived in a room anyway, the old line. Family helps family. I love family. I love that it should mean care and safety and fair words. But that morning, family felt like a set of hands at my pockets. I can help with a budget, I said. I kept my voice even. We can look at the bills, cut the extras, call the bank. Maya made a face like I had offered her plain toast. I need cash, not a lecture. She was not a villain. She was a habit. I could see how we got here. One ask, one fix, one more ask, one more fix, until the pattern became a wall. I did not want to live inside that wall. While we stood there, a thin rain started outside. I could smell wet cedar from the porch. The house felt smaller than ever, as if the walls had learned to lean in whenever we argued. I pictured all the times I had picked up an extra shift to avoid dinner, all the times I walked the long way home just to breathe before I opened the door. I thought of my little folder of dreams, notes and clippings I kept in a shoebox, a flyer for a short design course, a mock resume, a list of cities I wanted to see in America and in Europe. I had written London at the top in blue pen because I liked the sound of an English voice and the idea of a river I did not yet know. Maya put her hand out, palm up. Come on, she said. We're sisters. She was right about that. We were also 2 adults with different plans. I love you, I said, and I meant it. But the answer is no. She laughed, but it was not kind. Look who thinks she's strong, she said. I was not trying to be strong. I was trying to be honest. I washed my mug, set it on the rack, and went upstairs to my small room under the roof, where the ceiling sloped and the rain had a louder voice. In that room I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the suitcase in the closet. It was old and black and had a sticky wheel. I pulled it out, wiped the dust with my sleeve, and stood it upright by the door. My hands shook a little, the way hands do when the body knows a choice has been made before the mind writes it down. On my desk was my notebook. I opened it and wrote a list. Room to breathe. Work I like. Fair money. A safe door. The words looked almost childish, but they were true. I took a breath that felt deeper than the ones I had been taking for months. I opened my laptop. The screen lit the room with a cool light. The search bar waited. I typed, one-way ticket Seattle to London. My heart picked up. Flights lined the page like small doors. I scanned times, looked at prices, and felt fear try to hand me excuses. The soft house, the old habits, the way people might judge. I clicked on a flight that went through New York because I liked the idea of lifting off from one strong city in America and landing in a new one in Europe. The cost was $612. I did the math in my head, and on a small note, I could afford it. I pressed buy, and the page spun and then showed me the last screen, the one with the confirmation code and the small line that said you're going. I closed the laptop and sat very still. I could hear the rain again. I looked around my room, at the books in a stack on the floor, the plant that had one new leaf, the sweater slung over a chair. I felt grief slide in, not for leaving the house, but for leaving the version of me who had learned to say yes to keep peace. She had tried hard. She could rest now. I stood and pulled the suitcase onto the bed. I folded clothes into simple stacks. I tucked in my portfolio, a few prints of small ads I had designed for local shops, and my torn paper of deposits because I wanted to remember every hour I had traded for every dollar. I wrapped my passport in a scarf so I would not lose it. I put my notebook in the front pocket. I left the sweater out for morning. Downstairs, I found a pen on the counter and a card in a drawer. The card was plain and white. I wrote, "Maya, I love you. I can't fund the mortgage. I won't be part of a pattern that hurts us both. Please make a plan with the bank and with Dad. I will not argue or defend this. Lily." I set the card beside the chipped mug. I did not add a smiley face or a warning or a long speech. I had already said the important part. It was late when I finished. Mom had gone to bed. The house made the small old sounds it always made. The fridge hum, the pipe knock, the wind at the eaves. I walked to the porch, stepped under the overhang, and watched the rain thin into mist. I thought of the Atlantic Ocean and of the city where I would land. I did not know the street or the room or the job. I only knew I would not wake up in a life where my answer did not matter. That felt like wealth. Not money, though I would need money. A different kind of wealth. Time, choice, a steady voice. I went back inside, turned off the kitchen light, and climbed the stairs. At my door, I paused and looked down the hall toward Maya's room. A part of me wanted to knock and try one more time to say the right new words that might fix everything. But I had tried many times. I had written budgets. I had made calls. I had paid bills with dollars I had earned on feet that ached. Love had not failed. Boundaries had been missing. I turned the knob, stepped into my room, and closed the door. I set my phone to airplane mode and placed it face down. The screen stayed dark. The rain faded. Morning was already on its way. The morning I left America, I wore the same gray sweater I had folded at the end of chapter 1. I hugged Mom in the doorway of our blue house and felt the porch give a little under our weight, the old boards sighing as if they knew I would not cross them again for a long time. Maya kept her room, door closed. I rolled my black suitcase down Cedar Street and into a rideshare, and the driver, a man named Ben with a gentle laugh, asked where I was going. Europe, I said, and it sounded too large for my mouth, so I added, London. He said he'd always wanted to stand by the river and watch the city blink awake. At the airport, I bought a bagel and water for $9, then walked slow laps until boarding. The plane out of Seattle felt like a hallway with wings. I watched America shrink beneath the clouds and told myself the truth. I was not chasing a fantasy. I was walking away from a pattern. We touched down in New York for the connection, and I sat at a bright gate with tall windows and texted a friend, Nora, who used to live 2 streets over. "I'm really doing it," I wrote. She sent 3 heart emojis and then, "You can stay steady. Call if you wobble." By the time we took off again, the Atlantic looked like a sheet of steel, and I slept with my forehead against the cool window. London met me with a pale sky and the sweet shock of new air. Customs was simple. The officer, a man named Martin, glanced at my return field and saw it blink. "One way?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He stamped my passport with the calm of someone placing a cup on a saucer and waved me through. I took a train into the city, the car rocking like a cradle, and then walked the last blocks to a hostel I had booked for £85 for the first week. The room had a narrow bed, a metal lamp, and a window that faced a brick wall as red as a heartbeat. I made small rules for myself. Spend no more than £10 a day on food, walk everywhere unless it rained hard, and speak to at least one stranger, whose name I would remember. The first stranger was Clara, a woman with quick eyes who worked at the front desk and studied design at night. "Fresh start?" she asked as she scanned my card. "New chapter," I said. She showed me where the kettle lived and where the laundry cost £3 in coins. "The river is 5 minutes that way," she added, pointing, "and all the lights feel like a promise after dark." On my second day, I bought a cheap sim for £12 and searched for short courses I could afford. A studio in Shoreditch offered a week-long workshop in digital layout for £300, payable in 2 parts. I walked there the next morning with a notebook and sat at a long table while a tutor named James showed us how to set grids and choose clean fonts. My hands steadied over the keys. In the evenings, I rebuilt my old work into something sharper, and Clara leaned over my shoulder with tea and said, "That header sings." We talked about money openly. She paid £650 for a room in a shared flat and earned £1,100 a month at the desk. I ran my numbers and saw I could manage if I kept landing small jobs. On the 4th night, I sent out 5 emails with a simple subject, Lily/layout help available, and one link to a tiny portfolio. I priced fairly, nothing wild. £200 for a brand sheet, £120 for a one-page flyer, £300 for a compact website mock. The next morning, a bakery near Borough wrote back. The owner, a woman named Elise, said she needed menus that didn't look like they had been typed at midnight. I walked over and waited beside trays of warm bread. She handed me a printout dotted with crumbs and said, "Make it neat, make it kind to the eye." I did, in the hostel lounge, with Clara watching a crime show nearby. When I brought the draft back, Elise smiled and handed me £120 in notes and a paper bag of cinnamon buns. "You made my day easier," she said. On my way back, I crossed a bridge and watched the city lift itself into gold. The river moved like a long sentence. I thought of the blue house on Cedar Street and how, even from across an ocean, it still lived inside me. The porch light, the soft boards, the careful way I used to place my feet. I did not hate that house. I only needed another one, a place of my own choosing, with a front door painted a bright red and a lock that turned smooth. By the end of the week, I had spent £67 on food, £12 on the sim, £150 on the course deposit, and £85 on the hostel bed. I opened a free spreadsheet and put every pound in a column. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I could build on clean ground. On the 7th night, I stood by the river with Clara, both of us quiet for a while. "You look taller," she said. "Maybe I'm just standing up straight," I said. We laughed, light and real. I went to sleep with the window cracked, brick steady in my view, and the hum of a city in Europe warming the dark. On the 7th morning in London, I woke before my alarm and watched the square of pale light move across the hostel wall like a slow tide. I had meant to spend the day on client drafts and the last lesson for my design course, but my phone buzzed with a tone I still associated with home in America. It was a message from Dad, Robert, whose voice could soften a room or slice it in two depending on which way he held his words. "Help with her mortgage or don't come back," he wrote. No greeting, just a command that pretended to be love. My chest tightened. The river outside would be moving the same as always, but time had shifted inside me. I carried the phone down to the small kitchen and stood by the kettle. Steam rose and fogged the window. Clara patted in wearing thick socks and a grin that vanished when she saw my face. "Bad?" she asked. "Old," I said. We both knew what that meant. I poured hot water over tea and set the cup down to cool. My hands remembered other mornings in America. My sister's voice in our blue house, the hard ask, the soft promises. I said no there. I would say no here, too, in Europe, where the air felt new but the ties still tugged. I typed slowly. "I'm away from the toxic family." I watched the letters appear like stones set into a path. Then I attached the short video I had filmed on my last day in Seattle. It showed a loop I needed to break, Maya raising her voice, me asking for a budget, Dad saying don't make waves, Mom, Elaine, stirring tea that was already stirred. I did not send it to shame anyone. I sent it because I was done arguing about what was real. Clara stood beside me, silent, like a lighthouse. I pressed send. The phone showed the small paper airplane, then stillness. I finally took a sip of tea. It tasted like air after rain. By midday, the stillness cracked. A ping from Maya arrived first, words I didn't need to read to recognize the heat. Dad followed with a longer message about duty and gratitude, about the house, about how money keeps people loyal. I put the phone face down and opened my laptop. If I was going to keep my new life, I had to guard its gates. I logged in to every account she might touch, the old grocery card we once shared, the spare savings link from years ago, the dusty checking account where $64 still sat like a forgotten coin under a couch. One by one, I changed passwords, revoked access, added alerts. It felt less like slamming doors and more like mending a fence. When evening came, Clara and I walked by the river and ate cinnamon buns from Elise's bakery, their sugar going soft in the damp air. I told Clara the rest, how I had paid a bill once, then twice, then watched the asks multiply like rabbits, how the blue house in America had become a story of me making myself smaller so other people could feel tall. You're not cruel, Clara said. You're clear. I nodded, though the guilt still flickered like a faulty street lamp. On a bench, I opened my spreadsheet and added 2 new lines. Emergency fund, $300 target this month, and boundary. No transfers for family debts. Rules can be gentle when they protect what matters. By midnight, the phone lit up as if someone had set a fire beneath it. Silence had turned to nonstop calls. Maya, then Dad, then Mom's number, which always made me want to answer, if only to hear her breathing on the line. I let it ring. I kept thinking of a red front door I would one day paint on a house I paid for with work that didn't bruise me. I thought of the invoices due next week. £200 from a florist, £120 from a music teacher, $900 from the Boston team for a fresh landing page. Work is a kind of truth. It said, keep going. Back in the room, I propped my notebook against my knees and wrote a short statement to myself. Nothing poetic, just sturdy. I do not fund chaos. I do not accept threats as love. I do not return to rooms where my no is not heard. I set my phone to do not disturb, plugged it in across the room, and climbed into bed. The brick wall outside looked warm, like a hearth. I thought of America and of Europe, of the river here and the bay back home, of the price of a ticket and the worth of one small word held steady. The calls kept coming. I slept anyway. Boundaries held. The week after the message storm, the city in Europe steadied me with ordinary things. The scrape of buses at dawn, the clink of mugs in the hostel kitchen, the soft thud of mail through the slot at Clara's flat. I moved in with her on the 1st of the month, pound $6.50 for my room, due on the same day my design contracts usually paid. The house we shared was small and honest. 2 bright rooms, a narrow hallway, floors that creaked like they were telling jokes. I set my second-hand table by the window, lined up my pens, and taped a note to the wall that said, spend with care, work with care, love with care. When the light hit the paper, it glowed like a quiet oath. Work grew in clean lines. James, the tutor who'd taught grids, passed my name to a friend who managed a studio with clients in America. Remote is fine, his friend wrote. We pay in dollars. I said yes and set up a simple invoice system. My first wire from a team in Boston was $2,400, with another $900 promised if I could turn a landing page around by Friday. I did it in 3 late nights, my laptop warm against my wrists, Clara bringing tea and asking, how many pixels between those lines? I said, 8, and she whistled like 8 was the perfect answer. When the second wire hit, I split it on site. Rent in pounds, food in pounds, savings in dollars. The spreadsheet became a small mirror that reflected a life I could trust. Maya's call slowed, then flared, then slowed again. Dad, Robert, sent a final text that sounded like a sermon delivered through a keyhole. Family helps family. I typed back. Family keeps promises. I asked for a budget. I asked for respect. I'm not a bank. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for a week and did not die from it. Mom, Elaine, left one voice note that I played once and saved. I love you, Lily. I hope you're eating. I wrote her a short reply about cinnamon buns and soup, about walking by the river, about the way the city looks like a necklace at night. I did not mention money. I did not mention the blue house yet. Love, yes. Accounts, no. On Sundays, I took the train to a park and sat with a red notebook. I wrote down numbers and hopes in the same place so they could learn to be friends. £650 rent, £120 groceries, £35 transport, £60 soft extras, flowers once a month, a new kettle when ours sputters, a birthday card for Clara's brother, Max. On the other page I wrote, down payment, 1 day, $30,000. Under it, house in America with a red door. I added a small drawing of a square porch and a steady step. The blue house in Seattle will always be my first chapter, but the next one will be one I choose. I want a door that doesn't stick in the rain and a room with a sun stripe that moves across the floor at noon like a slow blessing. One afternoon, Elise from the bakery handed me a paper bag that felt heavier than bread. Inside was an envelope with £40 and a note. For the menus you fix before the rush. I logged the pounds, then walked the long way home. A man on a scooter almost clipped my heel and shouted, "Sorry," in a voice that made me laugh. Clara texted, "Dinner?" And I replied, "I'll cook." We ate pasta that cost a few coins and talked about names we liked for future pets and future projects. She said she might try a series of posters for local bands. I said I might pitch a design guide to a small paper in America, $300 for a 2-page spread. We made a pact to brag to each other when we passed small milestones. Bragging turned out to be a kind way to measure the distance between who we'd been and who we were becoming. At night, when the old guilt crept back wearing new shoes, I had a practice. I'd stand by the window and name what was true in the simplest words I could shape. I pay my rent. I do good work. I tell the truth. I keep my nose steady. The city answered with its own truths. The river moving in the dark, footsteps on the pavement, laughter from the flat next door. Boundaries, I learned, aren't walls. They're doors with locks you control. You can open them for love and close them against chaos. You can paint them any color you like. Mine, in my mind, stayed red. When the next month turned over, I moved $300 into my house fund and £50 into an envelope labeled Joy. I bought flowers for the table. Cheap tulips that leaned toward the light like they recognized a cousin in it. I sent Clara a thank you card for being the kind of friend who steadies the air. I even wrote to James to tell him the studio lead had paid on time and in full. He wrote back, "Proud of you, Lily." I read that line 3 times, then closed the laptop and let my shoulders drop. In the quiet, I could almost hear the future knocking the way polite guests do. Not urgent, just certain. I am still the woman who left with a suitcase and a number in a spreadsheet. I am also the woman who learned that freedom is a series of small, paid bills and big, intact promises. I work in pounds and dollars, sleep under a roof I split fairly, and save for a house in America that will be mine. If you ask what changed, I'll say it was not the river or the skyline, or even the flight. It was the door. I found the handle. I turned it. And now, when I close it at night, the latch clicks once, clean and kind. Boundaries held.